Introducing you to people across North Carolina and around the world who put their Catholic faith into action. This is FaithWorks on Catholic 540 AM Divine Mercy Radio. Now, here's your host for FaithWorks, Ellen White.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. Our show highlights individuals through God's grace who put their faith into action daily. Amazing people who have an interesting, sometimes overlooked impact on our Catholic faith. On FaithWorks, we share their stories. I'm your host, Ellen White. Welcome to Saints in the Making. I think we're at number 14 now, where we explore the lives of holy men and women who continue to inspire us on our journey of faith. This month, we turn our attention to three remarkable witnesses in the life of the Church: Saint Agatha, Saint Polycarp, and Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows, whose courage, fidelity, and deep love for Christ continue to guide us as we grow in holiness during February. We're once again joined by local Rob Agnelli, Catholic speaker, theologian, and longtime student of the saints, as we all are, who will guide us through their lives and help us to see how their witness speaks into our own call to holiness today. Welcome back, Rob.
Good to be here.
Gosh, I'm sitting here thinking with my intro, what did I say? Amazing people who have an interesting, sometimes overlooked impact on our Catholic faith. And it wasn't until, Rob, I started really studying the saints, or teaching in my meager way about the saints to our kids when we were homeschooling, that it opened up a whole new world. And it continues to every month as we talk about these saints and feast days. So I can't wait to unpack this with you. All right, so starting with Saint Agatha, whose feast day we celebrate February 5th, born in 231 AD, didn't live very long.
No, she was young. Yeah, she was 20 when she was martyred.
Who was she, and what was life like for Christians in the Roman-ruled?
Yeah, so at the time, the first, 4 centuries of the church, there's persecution, not necessarily all the time, but off and on and mostly on. So she grew up in a time where it was mostly off. And so she was born to a wealthy noble family in Sicily. And, she grows up in a time of where Christianity, she kind of hides her Christianity, but, it's kind of, people kind of know, and they know what the Christians are about, and they live more or less in peace and stability. But at about the age of 20, the Emperor Decius took the throne, and he issued an edict requiring all the citizens to now begin to sacrifice to the Roman gods.
All right. So what does it mean that Agatha consecrated her virginity to Christ?
Yeah. So when she was 15, she makes this offer to Christ and kind of give herself and her wealth solely to him. And essentially what that consecration of her virginity essentially means, she takes Christ as her spouse. And he in turn takes her and we'll see as we sort of unpack her, what happens to her, how important that ends up being. But, that's the general idea, is that, her virginity is something that's beautiful and good. And, rather than giving herself completely to a husband, she takes Christ as her husband. And the sign of that is to live as Christ lived as a virgin.
Okay, so how did her faith, I want to go kind of deeper into her faith.
Okay.
And understand, especially today, I think it's really hard to understand where she was and how she was able to embrace that in spite of her surroundings and how she was living.
Yeah, I think, the first most important thing, we have to be careful about looking at the saints. I know we've talked about this before, about seeing them as just these strong-willed, like especially in her case, like clearly does have a strong will. But it really all stems from, it's not her consecrating her virginity to Christ. It's Christ offering to give her the grace. Like he's approaching her, right? You did not choose me, I chose you. And so at the heart of that, right, is her yes, right? So she didn't come up with this idea herself. She just says yes to what Christ is offering, which is really what, for all of us, it's the same thing.
It's her fiat.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's our fiat as well. Be it done unto me according to your will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lord. So praying for his will to be done. All right, so what strikes you the most about her interior strength and freedom?
To sort of grasp it, I think it's helpful to kind of grasp what happens to her. So she's beautiful by all accounts, and she gets the attention of one of the Roman prefects. His name was Quintianus, probably about this sort of around the same age as her. And he wants to take her as his wife. She refuses pretty much his every attempt. And he doesn't really at first understand why she would do that. Right. So he sort of has this idea. At first, she just says no, she doesn't tell him why. And then as the persecutions begin, he realizes that I think she's a Christian, and that has something to do with it. So he decides to kind of press the issue, and convinces a judge to sentence her to a brothel, which, and she's sent to the brothel, and she maintains her purity even there, which only sort of serves to infuriate him. So she comes back, and I don't know, what do you call, like the head prostitute at the brothel is like, she's converting people. We can't have her here. Whatever you were trying to do is not working. So he brings her back and begins to threaten her with death. He's like, I'm going to out you and let everyone know you're a Christian. And she says, that's fine. Like, because if you do that, the name of Christ will just grow.
Wow.
And so this is again, a powerful grace that she receives, right? This fidelity to Christ as her spouse. And so he decides, okay, well, I'm gonna just put you in prison and have you tortured. And so that's what happens to her, and she's tortured pretty badly. And now it's sort of a diabolical rage where he's just destroying her beauty. And at one point he even has her breasts cut off, which is why you often see a statue of her with, two breasts on a tray, right? Which is, kind of funny because for the longest time, I think people thought that it was bread. So she's the patron saint of bakers. And then they realized, oh, no. Now
that's not it.
Yeah. So, which is,
cancer.
but is, again, like the giving of her life, right? Tied up in the Eucharist. So you see that. And so he really, really just tears her apart. And puts her back in prison. St. Peter visits her and heals her, which only then enrages him even worse. And so finally, he has her beaten, burned, and puts her on these pottery shards, and then she's finally dies.
Well, I want to ask, Rob, she had an understanding, I'd imagine, of suffering, not as defeat, but as union with Christ. Explain that.
Yeah, so this goes back to, I think, a little bit about, St. Paul talks about this in, I think it's the beginning of the second letter to the Corinthians, where he talks about like people suffering for other people's benefit, in the sense that it changes you. So we all suffer. Everyone is going to suffer, but what the saints really understand is that suffering finds its meaning when you're suffering with, right? So and it's not just with Christ; it's with other people too. Because what suffering does, right, can do one of two things. It can either close us in on ourselves, and then you want other people to suffer too, because you're miserable, and so you're watching other people and hoping they're suffering. But the person who is willing to suffer with actually now becomes this compassionate. And so in a certain sense, she begins to see herself, like all the saints do, as suffering with Christ. So in some ways, going back to St. Paul, she's alleviating the suffering of Christ in her suffering. And so she sees what it really is for, right? It's for her good. It's for the good of other people. and most especially, it is a way to unite her with her spouse.
Okay, and then going to the martyrdom, why is that powerful for the church?
I mean, it's
She kind of alluded to that.
The saying is Tertullian, right? That the blood of martyrs is the seed of the church. And it's just simply because like all of that pent up grace like is released, right? Like Christ puts this powerful grace in her life. And, the martyrdom essentially, we'll see this probably when we talk about Polycarp a little bit, is ultimately like where they got the word martyrdom is because it's witnessing to the faith, right? And what that witness does is everyone around that sees it, has access to a grace to believe in Christ.
Yeah, I want to go back to, and I was kind of thinking about this when you were explaining suffering, and I've often wondered if the length of time that we suffer. I mean, in our own family right now, we're experiencing some suffering, and everything is perfect with God and God's timing, and it just seems like since this is a long suffering, I'm seeing fruit with a family member that's coming out of it. But had it been just a short little encounter with suffering, the fruit wouldn't have. Can you speak to that?
Yeah,
Can you understand what
I think it's partially a little bit of a misunderstanding about maybe the manner in which God, permits suffering in our life, right? So he knows exactly like the amount of suffering you need in order to be sort of conformed and to become a saint, right? And no more, no less. And what I don't think most people grasp, and when you do begin to grasp this is when you really have spiritual growth, is that God chooses the most gentle way to make you suffer, right?
God.
The most gentle way.
Sad.
Yeah, and when you grasp that, and you begin to see God as gentle, then it changes you, right? Like that's how you change, because the question always with suffering is like, why is God doing this to me? But if you can go sort of and just go, oh, like he's gently nudging me, and this is the most gentle way he can do this, then you don't want to let anything go, but you also begin you end up closer to God than you were when you started, because you've now seen him in a new light.
Jesus Christ, Lord of all, you see my heart, you know my desires, possess all that I am, you alone. Why does this quote so beautifully sum up Saint Agatha's holiness?
For this, I think, the purity of heart that she, like, this is, that's ultimately what's being tested here. Because at any point through there, she could have gone, like, okay, that's enough. Like that, this, I've done my due diligence here. Like all the decks are sort of stacked against me. And you see it's, the prefect is really pushing her, trying to make her give up, but she loves Christ so purely that she's given him her heart, right? And you can see this, like you see this in marriages in a lot of ways, right? Where it's just, once you're around your spouse long enough, you can almost see their heart, right? And with their heart, you know their desires. And so she just, because she has a spirit of heart, and she can see clearly, she's able to give herself completely. And so none of this really, in a certain sense, to her means that much. Like he's not taking anything from her, right? And so she's just willingly giving, and she Christ knows what she wants, and he gives it to her.
Well said. All right. So what can we learn today as modern Catholics, especially young women, I'd say, from her courage and faith?
Yeah. So, I mean, the culture is not that different from when it was then, especially like the assault on chastity. And so I think where, Agatha can certainly be a model of that is to just understand that only when you're chaste are you actually free. Like no one would say that Agatha was somehow not free, right? And it's because of her purity that she was completely free to gift herself to Christ, which is what, chastity ultimately is. And no one could force her to do anything she didn't want to do. And so like that connection between seeing chastity as freeing yourself up to make a gift of yourself. Mm-hmm. I think she models that perfectly, whereas it tends to be where we see chastity as sometimes negative, as if we're sort of repressing something, right? We're not seeing it as a means to be free to give of yourself.
And I'd also add, too, that if you happen to be tuning in and you're hearing this and you're a young woman or a young man and you've already given yourself away, you can still repent of that and start again.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, again, like she was in some really dire situations, right? And, Christ is always knocking, and there is no such thing as damaged goods, right?
Oh, well said. All right. And ask for St. Agatha's intercession.
Absolutely.
In that regard. Okay. So switching gears to St. Polycarp. Feast day is February 23rd. He was around 69 to 155 AD. Who was he, and why is he such a critical bridge between the apostles and the early church?
Yeah, so he was a disciple of John the Evangelist. He was born to Christian parents, and he's the sort of link between the apostles and the next generation of like church fathers. So he was a teacher of Saint Irenaeus. His name, Polycarp, means much fruit. And so when you read Eusebius's church history, he talks quite a bit about Polycarp, and he essentially says that he was educated by the apostles, and they're the ones that appointed him as bishop of Smyrna in Asia Minor.
Wow. Okay, so being formed by St. John the Apostle, I always envision St. John just laying on Christ's chest and just being loved by Christ. It's such an image that has really stuck with me. So learning from somebody like that, how did that shape Polycarp and his understanding of Christ and the faith? Yeah,
well, so Polycarp is actually mentioned in the book of Revelation. When Christ is talking to the seven churches, he talks about to the angel of the church of Smyrna, which is Polycarp. And there's this beautiful sort of message, right, that St. John is giving Polycarp through St. John, essentially letting him know that, Christ is well aware of the tribulation that he's suffering. He knows about his poverty, and he knows about all of the people who he calls them from the synagogue of Satan that are after him. And he just tells them, fear none of those things that you suffer. And then he says the devil's going to put you in prison for 10 days. And, you're going to have tribulation. And, but if you're faithful until death, I'll give you the crown of life. And so when Christ gives St. John this message, Polycarp's like, oh, like Christ is saying, be faithful and I will get the crown of life, meaning he's going to be martyred. And with all things, with sort of a proper understanding, right, he realizes, oh, I'm being given the grace of martyrdom, which, then has this sort of tremendous effect on him. But in a lot of ways, what he did is kind of pick up where St. John left off in some ways with fighting the heresies, like Gnosticism. Tell me
again what Gnosticism is.
So Gnosticism, it's just a general sort of set of heresies in which it's like the secret knowledge, and has all these sort of different variations of it, but there's like an insider group that knows the real story rather than it, being for everybody.
And as little peons, there's no way we're...
Yeah, exactly. And you see a lot of times what happens is, and this is, what St. John is sort of pushing back against and what St. Irenaeus also pushed back against, it also ends up being like, body bad, spirit good, and a rejection of the incarnation. And so, but he also fighting some of the heresies with Marcion, who rejected the God of the Old Testament, said it was a different God. So he receives this grace of perseverance, to continue essentially John's mission.
Wow. What kind of a shepherd was he? to his
I
people.
mean, I don't know that we know a whole lot. We know what Eusebius talks about him. Just had a special love for the poor and widows. We know that he sort of understood. He understood that he was going to die for his people. But a lot of ways we don't really know what he did. What kind of personality he was as a pastor. That sort of direct connection to the apostles. There's one point in his life where the Pope calls him to Rome because he wants to ask him about the date of Easter.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So one of the early sort of controversies is like when should Easter be? Should it be the Sunday after the crucifixion, like the 14th of Nisan, or should it be the Sunday after that? And so there's this sort of debate, and the Pope at the time brings Polycarp to Rome to talk to him about it. He's like, what do the apostles say about this? And just, it's another one of those cases of early on this papal primacy, right? Where, this guy knew the apostles. Why didn't he just say, I knew the apostles, here's what the deal is? But, he defers to the Pope.
All right. So if you're just tuning in, this is Ellen White with FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. And today I'm joined once again by Rob Agnelli as we reflect on the saints we honor in February: Saint Agatha, Saint Polycarp, and Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows. We're exploring their lives, their virtues, and the lasting impact they continue to have on the life of the church. And we're grateful for our show's sponsor, Thales College. All right, so you talked a little bit about persecution during Polycarp's time and his refusal to deny Christ. Was this a challenge for him? Or you talked about with John and his connection with John, and he knew that he was going to receive the crown of martyrdom, so he knew he had Christ's grace on his side.
Yeah.
I imagine that.
Yeah, and so his martyrdom is sort of the first account we have of an eyewitness of martyr, like maybe outside of St. Stephen.
I was just going to say.
But it's also the first time that term martyrdom martyr is applied to someone killed for the faith. And what they did is they wrote it down, and then it was sort of like an encyclical, and they passed it around to the churches. But what essentially happens is the Roman officials come to the city to get him, and he knows they're coming, and he refuses to leave. So he could have just gone off and hid somewhere. But again, because he knew what his mission was, he allowed himself to be caught. So the proconsul brings him into the stadium, and then there's this audible voice that's heard, and it says, "Be strong and show thyself a man, Polycarp." And so people hear this voice, and so the proconsul, of course, sort of tries to egg him on a little bit. He's like, "Look, you're an old man, just very quietly, just kind of apostatize and just go about your business." And this beautiful response in that he thinks it's the most absurd thing ever, because why would this deep personal relationship with Christ, why would he do that to Christ? He's like, I've served him for 86 years and he's done me no harm. Why would I curse my king who saved me?
There you go. That was it.
Yeah.
All right. So why is this one of the most powerful testimonies in Christian history? What do you think with him saying this?
Well, I mean, the reason ultimately is, one, because, we're still talking about it,
Yep.
2,000 years later. But it's also just the age in which he is. As most people, they get to be 86 and, they think themselves useless. And here he is, 86 years old, and he is on the front lines. Right. Again, going back to like this, there's no such thing as like over the hill with Christ or any of that, right? And he's, he just says, you threaten me with fire, and then this flame goes around him like an arch, and all the people can do is smell incense, and the flames won't touch him, and they end up having to go in and kill him. with the sword, and so much blood flows out of him that the flames all extinguish.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So, this, again, this witness is why the church grows so fast.
Seed of martyrs.
Yep.
Wow. All right. So what does he teach us about enduring faith and perseverance to the very end of life?
Yeah. I think we talked about this with John Henry Newman, where he was talking about how, in a certain sense, martyrdom is like the fruit of a lifetime. And it's really a fruit of a lifetime of white martyrdoms, right? And he was talking about how you should rehearse your martyrdom, right? Because of this. And so, and St. Ignatius of Antioch was one of his contemporaries, and he looked at it as his reward for all his time of being faithful. And that's the same thing Polycarp sees it as his reward for all of his times of being faithful.
I don't mean to bring in, I've got so many points that I would love to make with this and with martyrdom, and, how martyrdom is the fruit of a lifetime, and how if we take these little steps each time, denying ourselves little by little by little, it builds over time for sure. And it's strengthening. But I can't help but think about like St. Catherine of Siena or other saints that desired martyrdom and they didn't get it. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's certainly something to reflect on. But
I mean, in a certain sense, we should all desire it, right?
Yes.
And understand it's a grace that's given to us. But because in a lot of ways, honestly, you're supposed to offer your death to Christ anyway and let him choose how you die, right? And because he's sanctified death, and that's our final offering to him. And so in a certain sense, it doesn't matter whether you're publicly martyred or not. Death should look the same as an offering to Christ. And so in that way, for St. Catherine of Siena or St. Francis, I know he kind of actively pursued it. That's a good thing. We should all desire that, right? I think, having fear of that, like there shouldn't really be fear of that.
Well, and I think, several people, several saints, several people that I tune into on a regular basis that are talking about the church, talk about how important it is to have an eternal perspective. And to recognize that we are just pilgrims here. I mean, it's easier said than done. I don't know, for whatever reason, that's always in the back of my mind. So it's not such a challenge for me, and just recognizing that.
Well, I mean, in martyrdom, is one of the ways you skip purgatory, right? So, I mean, it makes sense. Like that might be a good way to, a good way to make up for penance you should have done during your life. Is to have this grace of martyrdom.
Wow. Great stuff. Okay. So switching gears here just a little bit early, actually. So we have a lot of time to be talking about St. Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows, whose feast day we celebrate on February 27th. And I have a particular devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows. So I'm excited to learn about St. Gabriel. 1838 to 1862, another
young one.
Not so old, young person. Who was Gabriel before religious life?
Yeah, so he was the 11th child to his parents, baptized the same day as he was born on March 1st, 1838.
Where?
In Italy. He was named baptized Francis. His mother died when he was 4.
Named after St. Francis?
Yes, named after St. So his family, I think, was from Spoleto, which I think is near Assisi.
Oh, I love Italy.
So he was named after St. Francis, which I'm sure a lot of people in that area are. And he has a somewhat normal childhood. There's no sort of signs of, extraordinary holiness. He's plagued by the typical like teenage angst, a little bit of anger, a little bit of disobedience, a little bit of giddiness. Didn't like to be corrected.
I'm familiar with these qualities.
Yeah. So very typical. You would look at him probably at 15 or 16 and go, yeah, like
no, he's not going to be a saint.
I'm not so sure that by 24 he'll be dead and a saint.
All right. So what experiences led to his conversion and growing desire for holiness?
It is clear that he was being called to the priesthood, but that he was running away from it. And he had one of the reasons why I love him, especially as a teenager, he is probably, I don't know this is a real thing, but he's like the patron saint of procrastination. Because he would constantly procrastinate. He'd wake up and he'd say, well, today I'm going to do it. And then he'd get distracted by something and run away. So several times God would get his attention, sending him sickness. And Francis would promise if God makes him better, he'll run to his vocation. And then eventually he would yield to worldliness. And God would get his attention again. And so eventually he sort of caves. And
how old was he when he sort of caved?
Probably about 18, I think, at the time. So he actually has this beautiful sort of experience with Our Lady. This is how he ends up Our Lady of Sorrows. So the cathedral there in Spoleto was dedicated to Our Lady of the Assumption, and they would process this icon in front of the cathedral. And he hears Our Lady ask, like, what are you doing? Hasten, become a religious. And then with that, she carries this powerful grace that he overcomes all of his procrastination.
Oh, my God. Just
all at once. Every interior obstacle just fell away. And he's finally determined and resolved to do it, which... it was good because nobody took him seriously because he goes to his father and tells him, he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like tomorrow morning you'll wake up and you'll do something else. He had a brother who was a Dominican who maybe took him a little bit more seriously, but nobody took him seriously. And then when he begins, so initially he had gone to a Jesuit school. And so he initially was examined by them to maybe become a Jesuit, but he gets this, interior sort of call to the Passionists. And pretty much everyone is like, okay, they're rigorous. You're never going to make this. Like, what are you doing? And so his father, very prudently sends him to his uncle, his father's brother, who is the vicar general of a nearby diocese to sort of test the vocation. And he comes back and tells his father, no, I think this is authentic. And so he does enter the Passionists.
Now tell me again about the Passionists, Rob. I don't know if we've talked about them before.
Yeah, so the Passionists, St. Paul of the Cross, they're I think the beginning of the 19th century, they were sort of formed mostly in Italy at the time. And, as the name sort of suggests, they have a special devotion to the Passion of Christ.
Okay. And you kind of alluded to it, but didn't go through with why he's associated with Our Lady of Sorrows. You said there was this Our Lady of the Assumption.
Yeah, so it starts with that, right? He has this devotion to her because he feels like everything came from her, that powerful grace. And so, the vocation and then sort of helping make it stick, he has this great devotion to her. And then I think through the Passionists, he developed, a greater devotion to her because of her role in Christ's Passion.
I found, and I don't know, it just seems like when people, religious, have a devotion to the Blessed Mother, there's just something extra. What would you say about...
it makes, it's not necessarily something extra. I often reflect on this because, we're all supposed to have a devotion to Our Lady,
yes,
right? Like
right.
Christ commanded it.
Right.
And, so in a certain sense, not only did he command us to have a devotion to her, he commanded her to have a devotion in a certain way to us, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the issue ultimately is like Our Lady is pursuing all of us, and, only some of us allow ourselves to be caught by her. And I think, that's probably one of the criteria for being a saint is Our Lady caught you.
Yeah. That's so true. And, so with him and his devotion to the Blessed Mother, especially in her sorrows, how did that shape his interior life?
Yeah, very similar to, he had, he just had he was naturally drawn. I think, and some of this is probably because his father was the same way towards people who are suffering. And so I think he is drawn to her in her suffering.
Okay.
You know, at the foot of the cross, and so he sees himself as this intercessor and reliever of other people's sufferings. So he has a great sort of devotion to, or great charity for the holy souls in purgatory.
Oh, okay.
You know, his brethren named him, I think, the Apostle of Purgatory, because it's so much zeal for the suffering souls in purgatory. And you know, so mostly, you know, and then when he begins to suffer, you know, he's very aware of the fact that that's something he can offer to Christ.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so he lived a very short life, and I'm always amazed with, you know, like Saint Therese, the Little Flower, or, you know, other saints that lived really short lives, and how their stories still resonate so deeply with us as we live today. How can that be? How are they so compelling?
Well, it's because God made them for that. Like, I mean, Saint Therese is a great example, like very similar to him. You know, they're practically contemporaries. Nobody knew about him.
Yeah,
like
hidden.
he was just, and what happened is he was buried in one of the Passionist churches, but that church ended up being abandoned when you know, when the Papal States. You know, during this time in Italy, there's a lot of revolt, and so the church ends up being abandoned. And the Passionists come back 30 years later, and there's all these people who have gone to pray at his tomb, and they're having miracles. And so, you know, and what they were trying to do is actually just go back and get his remains and move them, and the people wouldn't let them. And they were just not going to allow his relics to be removed. And so in a lot of ways, it's a little bit mysterious how he becomes well known, right? And you know, it wasn't something he was seeking, and in a certain sense, it wasn't something necessarily that he did in this life. But you know, God used him and used his life in order to, you know, spread his glory, and it just looks different in all the saints, right? And what's beautiful about it, right, is it really upends our definition of like success and fame, and because no one would have grasped that about him. And you know, literally, you know, he changed the world, right? Like I don't know if you know, there's like this connection between him and Saint Gemma, where she had this devotion to him because somebody had given her a book of his life. And at the time she had, there's something wrong with it. I don't remember what it was, but it was pretty serious. I think it was a brain tumor.
Saint Gemma Galgani.
Yeah.
Okay.
She had I think it was a brain tumor, and it didn't look good. And so somebody gave her his biography, and she couldn't read it, but she put it under her pillow. And so he appeared to her, and he was instrumental in healing her. And in fact, he even said, you know, he told her, he's like, you'll be a Passionist. And so she had this great devotion to him. And this is like, you know, she's 15 or 20 years after he dies, right? So it's just, you know, the saints changed the world.
And they find us, and, you know, the hidden ones. And you bring up such an interesting point, too. A couple of things. One is when you have a friend that says, hey, I have this little booklet about the saint, might be interested in reading it. You should take them up on it. But I can't help but think about Saint Charbel. Saint Charbel is popping up everywhere.
Yeah, you're being stalked, now. Right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a real again, this is when the faith gets real, right?
Yes.
Like these people are alive and active.
Exactly.
And members of the church. It's no different than, you know, someone in the church is like, oh, I really need to talk to Ellen. Like,
exactly.
It's the same thing.
It is so awesome. It makes me so excited to be Catholic too. All right. My Jesus, I will live and die for you. Why does this simple line capture the heart of Saint Gabriel?
Yeah, on his whole spirituality was, he wanted to be consumed for Christ. And when you make offers to Christ like that, he'll take you up on them. All right, so don't be surprised when he takes everything, when you offer everything, right? Because he loves you and thinks very highly of you. And so, he said he wanted to be consumed by Christ. So what does he die of? He dies of consumption. He dies of tuberculosis. And he very specifically asked to die of that because of the way they would die, because he could still have his wits about him and pray all the way to the end. And so he dies with this little icon of Our Lady of Sorrows and Jesus against his heart. And and that's, more or less how he lived.
I was in a situation recently, and I don't even know if we'll use this in the interview, but I have a coin with the Sacred Heart of Jesus in the front of my purse, and I was going to grab something. We're sitting in a meeting, and I go to pull it out, and it pops out right in front of a friend of mine. Oh, what's this? I think I'll hold it. So, little things like that, I think it's so awesome. They are alive and with us, and helping us out too. And St. Gabriel is another one that would be a powerful intercessor for young people today.
Yeah, well, he is the patron saint of youth.
Okay.
And what he really, if you were sort of encapsulate him, he showed how you can protect yourself from vanity of the world, right? Because, by all accounts, he could have lived a pretty prestigious worldly life, which is why he was so torn. But it just shows that, at any point, that the grace is available to overcome that. And, to wake up one morning and just, decide you're going to respond to the grace. I'm going to give myself completely to Christ. And, and he will take it and run with it.
You take it and run with it, and make sure you're utilizing the awesome sacraments that we have in the church to strengthen us as we go on this journey. All right, let's do a final tie-in for all these saints that we discussed today. When we look at Agatha and Polycarp and Gabriel together, what do they show us about faithfulness at every stage of life, youth, maturity, and suffering?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, like we talked about with Polycarp, is that in a certain sense, we become younger.
Yes, that's
right?
So true.
We become younger. He was never more powerful than at 86. And that ultimately, I think, flips the way we, especially a culture that's obsessed with youth. It just flips everything on its head yet again, which is what I think the saints are there for, right? To flip the world on its head so that we can see, we can only really see it when we're standing on our heads.
Mm-hmm. At 86, he was really a child of God. That's a great point. All right. Any other final thoughts about these guys? Okay, we've got a lot of wonderful intercessors here that we can call on. St. Agatha, St. Polycarp, and St. Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows. Thank you so much, Rob. Great reflections today, and I cannot wait to look towards next month and see what kinds of conversations we'll be reminded yet again of our powerful intercessors. All right, if you missed any part of this episode or want to catch up on past conversations filled with inspiration and hope, you can find them all at divinemercyradio.org. Just click on local shows. And don't forget, you can take FaithWorks with you wherever you go. Just download the free Divine Mercy Radio app from your app store. Simply search Divine Mercy Radio NC, and you're all set to listen anytime, anywhere. Saints Agatha, Polycarp, and Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows, pray for us. God bless.